how can a life of total silence create an echo that lasts for centuries? I mean, think about that for a second. It sounds like a paradox, right? Well, today, we're going to dive into a story that does exactly that. We're talking about the story of Charbel Makhlouf. This was a man who literally traded a shepherd's staff for a rosary, and his home in a tiny Lebanese village for a hermitage. You know, his life is this incredible, powerful example of how the quietest lives can sometimes leave behind the loudest legacies.
All right, so where does a journey like this even begin? Well, it starts way up in the highest village in all of Lebanon, and it starts with a young boy named Yusuf Makhlouf, long before anyone in the world knew him as Saint Charbel.
You know, his early life was, well, it was a real crash course in both hardship and faith. Think about it, his father dies when he's just 3 years old. By 7, he's already working as a shepherd. These weren't just facts on a timeline. They were the very seeds of a life that was going to be all about quiet contemplation and this deep, deep connection to something much bigger than the everyday world. And this next part, I think, really tells you everything you need to know about his character from the very beginning. While most kids his age were probably out playing, young Yusuf was actively looking for solitude. He would take his flock out and find this little cave, and that became his own personal sanctuary for prayer. This wasn't something his parents told him to do. It was just this deep internal calling he felt, even as a little kid.
So, that early calling, it didn't just fade away. In fact, it grew stronger, and it eventually led him to a decision that would change absolutely everything. A choice to leave his entire world behind and join the monastery.
And I mean, just like that, at 20 years old, he just leaves. He walks away from his village, from his family, from everything he had ever known. Can you just imagine the kind of resolve that takes? He simply decided, this is my path, and headed for the monastery of Our Lady of Mafuk.
But here's the thing, he wasn't running away or defying his family. In fact, his mother's reaction is just wow. In this incredible act of faith, she gave him what sounds like an almost prophetic blessing. She didn't just accept it, it's like she saw his destiny, telling him she knew God would make you a saint. Just incredible.
So once he's in the monastery, he dives headfirst into a life of complete humility. First, he chooses the name Charbel to honor an ancient martyr. Then he actively takes on all the jobs nobody else wanted to do. We're talking cleaning the corridors, collecting garbage, clearing uncultivated land, the hard, thankless stuff. For him, devotion wasn't about talking, it was about doing, it was about service. So after years of all that study and all that hard labor, he's finally ordained as a priest in 1859. He then spends another 16 years at the Monastery of St. Maron. 16 years, living and serving in that community. But you know what? For Charbel, even this wasn't quite enough. He started to feel a pull, a call to go even deeper into his faith. And that pull brings us to what is really the most defining chapter of his entire life. See, after all those years in the community, he felt a calling for complete and total solitude. He wanted to become a hermit, to dedicate every single waking moment to prayer and to God. Now, this wasn't as simple as just asking for permission. Becoming a hermit, that's an extreme step, even for a monastery. And his superiors, understandably, were a little hesitant. So they decided to put it to the test. They asked for a sign from God to prove that this was truly the right path for Charbel. And the sign they asked for wasn't something small. It was, well, a miracle. It was a test of faith. They took his lamp, but instead of filling it with oil, they filled it with water. So the question was simple, but also completely impossible. Could his lamp burn with water? And the very next day, the answer came. The lamp, filled with nothing but water, was burning, just like normal. The sign had been given, permission was granted, he could finally retreat from the world and enter the hermitage.
And he stayed there for 23 years. Just let that number sink in for a minute. 23 years. For more than 2 decades, he lived in almost total solitude. This wasn't some week-long retreat. This was his life, a life dedicated to one single silent purpose. And that purpose meant stripping away absolutely everything, possessions, conversation, even the company of his fellow monks, just to get to what was truly essential.
So his days just became this cycle of intense devotion. I'm talking hours and hours spent kneeling in prayer, in deep meditation. People said he would answer questions if asked, always kindly, but he'd only say what was absolutely necessary. His silence wasn't empty, It was a space that was completely filled with communion. And really, it was this radical statement. In a world that's all about doing,
His life showed that sometimes the most profound thing you can do is just be.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a truly extraordinary turn. Because for a man who spent his entire life trying to be hidden from the world, his biggest impact, well, that would come along after he was gone. He passed away on Christmas Eve in 1898. And for about 50 years, his story was just as quiet as his life had been. But then in 1950, his tomb was opened. And that's when a flood of reported miracles began. This wave of incredible, often unexplainable events is what led to his beatification in 1965, and then finally his canonization as a full-fledged saint in 1977.
And this isn't just something from the history books. His legacy is very much alive right now, today. People from all corners of the globe still report healings, both spiritual and physical, that they attribute to his intercession. That quiet hermit's echo, it's not fading away. It seems like it's actually still growing.
So, what are we supposed to take away from all this? Why does this story of a hermit from the 1800s in Lebanon still hit home for so many people in our busy modern world? What's the connection?
Well, to really get it, you have to understand this one key idea, asceticism. It's a bit of a formal word, but all it means is a lifestyle where you intentionally step away from worldly pleasures, from all the distractions, so you can focus completely on your spiritual goals. And Charbel's entire life was basically a masterclass in how to do that.
And I think this is where his story really truly connects with us today. Come on, we live in an age of non-stop noise, right? A constant buzz of notifications, emails, social media, it never ends. Charbel's life is the complete opposite. It's like this powerful counter-melody, reminding us of what can be found not by adding more stimulation, but by finding that profound quiet, that peace of a soul at rest.